Hello Synapse community, my name is Ryan Majitimer. I'm a product manager on the Azure Synapse Analytics team, and today is the February edition of the Synapse MVP video series. For those of you in the know, each month I'm joined by an MVP, and we talk about something they're interested in. This month I'm joined by Shabnam Watson, and we're going to be talking about incremental refreshes in Power BI with Azure Synapse Analytics as your data source. I'm going to hand it over to Shabnam. Welcome.
Hey Ryan, thank you for having me on this channel. I'm very excited to be here. Hello everyone, my name is Shabnam Watson. I'm a Microsoft Data Platform MVP, speaker and blogger from United States. My current areas of focus are Power BI and Azure Synapse Analytics. Today, I want to show you how easy it is to set up incremental refresh from Power BI when you're working with larger data sets that are sourced out of Azure Synapse Analytics Serverless SQL pools. When you set up incremental refresh, you will reduce your overall refresh time from Power BI side. You will reduce the pressure on your back-end system, and you will also reduce your overall cost when working with Azure Synapse Analytics Serverless SQL pools. Let me show you how easy it is to set this up from Power BI and Azure Synapse Analytics. Here I am inside Azure Synapse Studio under the Data Hub, and under the Link tab, I can see the storage account that this Azure Synapse instance works with. Here I have some sample Parquet files that we can get started with. This folder is partitioned by year, month, and date. As you can see, here the top folders are by year, then by month, then by day, and inside of each one there is a Parquet file. Now let's go back up to the root. All you have to do to generate a sample query from this folder is to right-click on it and select New SQL Script, then select Top 100 Rows, and then tell it the format, which in this case is Parquet, and then click on Apply. This will generate a sample query that you can run. Let's go ahead and run this. This uses the open row set to reference the files in that path and select the top 100 rows from it. Now you can see the results down here. What we don't have here though is the folder names that we're gonna need to do incremental refresh on. So what you can do is you can take this code and put this in a view and add some additional data to it. So let's go here and take a look at an example that I've created. So this is the same code as it was before with a couple of modifications. One of the first ones is that, as you can see here, instead of having a path that ends in star star like before, I have added this section that references those folders, PU year, PU month, and PU date. These are the exact folder names that were in the lake with a wildcard in front of them. When you do that, then you can use a function called file path to reference those folder names and pull the values out. And on top of that, what you can do is you can cast these into the proper data types that you're going to need later on for Power BI. In particular, the date time, the pickup date time needs to be date time. Hence here I have cast this to date time too. So once you put this in a view, then you can reference it with just a regular SQL query. So let's go ahead and run this and see what we get. Now you can see that you get those values here as well. And you can use this query in Power BI as your source, and you can use the datetime column to set up incremental refresh. Now, if you're working with the Delta version, you do something very similar, except that this time there's no need for you to use the file path function. You can directly reference those folder names. So there is no more need to use the file path function. So like before, you can do some typecasting in here to prepare it for Power BI. And one more thing to notice down here is that there's also no more a need to put in this particular format. This particular format is only required for Parquet. So for Delta, you end the path with a slash. And now that you have this in a view, you can use a SQL code to get the results out. Before you go to Power BI Desktop, there's one property that you need to get from Azure Synapse Analytics. If you go to the Manage Hub, under the SQL pools, you will see the built-in, which is the same as Serverless SQL pool. If you click on that, you will see the SQL endpoint for your serverless SQL pool. So let's go ahead and copy that and go to Power BI Desktop. In Power BI Desktop, under Get Data, you want to choose Azure Synapse Analytics SQL and then click on Connect. In the next window, under the server, you want to put in the connection string for your serverless SQL pool and then click on OK. This brings up a list of databases. I'm going to choose my first Synapse database, which is the database that I have set up for this demo, and then choose the Delta view. Here I can see a preview of the data, and I'm going to click on Transform Data to go to Power Query Editor to set up incremental refresh. Now you need to set up two parameters that will be used by incremental refresh. So you would go to Manage Parameters and click on New Parameter. The first parameter is called range start, and you want to give this a data type of date time. And for the value, I'm here going to give it January 1st, 2023. And then I'm going to click on New here and create a second parameter called range end. This one also is going to have the data type of date time. And for the value, I'm going to give this January 2nd, 2023. Now that we have the parameters, we can use them to filter the data from our main table with them. So you want to go to the column that you're going to use for creating your partitions based off of. So here, if you click on this down arrow next to PU date, you will see that there's an option for datetime filters, and under there you can choose between. And this is where you tell Power BI to filter the rows so that it would only keep the rows that are equal or after to range start, and they are before range end. Let's go ahead and click on OK. Now you can see that the data in Power BI Desktop is also filtered to January 1st, 2023. The next step is to close and apply out of here. Once the data is loaded, here we're going to create one measure and then finish setting up incremental or refresh. Let's create the measure. The measure is going to be a simple count of rows. Now I'm going to put the measure on the canvas and change it to the card so we can just see the number better. These are the trips that are associated with January 1st, 2023. Now to set up incremental refresh, I'm going to go back here and bring up this menu and click on incremental refresh. Once you have the parameters set, when you get to this interface, all you have to do to enable incremental refresh is to toggle this control. And then this is where you would define the incremental refresh policy. For instance, we are going to tell Power BI to archive the data for the last 7 years and incrementally refresh the data for the last 7 days. What this means is that the first time when we submit a refresh from Power BI service, it's going to load all of the data starting from 7 years ago all the way up to today. And then for the next refreshes, Power BI is only going to refresh the last 7 days that are specified here. And this is on a rolling window, meaning that the next day it's going to move the 7 days forward and the next day and so on and so forth. So I'm going to click on apply here and close this window. Then I'm going to publish this to Power BI service. And once it is published to Power BI service, I'm going to open it up from Power BI service. As you can see, this took the exact amount of data that was in Power BI Desktop, so it has not created the partitions yet. So let's go to the workspace and find the data set and issue a refresh. Now, this is the refresh that's going to start creating all the partitions based on the partitioning policy that we provided, and it's going to load the data for all of those partitions. So it's importing the data for the past 7 years all the way up until today into those partitions. Now we can go to Synapse Studio and take a look at the queries as they're being submitted. In Synapse Studio, under the Monitor Hub, under SQL Request, you can see the queries coming in. And as you can see, we have several of these queries, one for each partition. You can see that, for instance, this one took 17 seconds and processed 537 megabytes worth of data. If you look at the query, you can see that this is for one of the bigger partitions. This is for all of 2022. Whereas this other query that processed only 10 megabytes worth of data and took 5 seconds, this is only for 1 day worth of data. Now let's go and click refresh to see if the queries have finished. And now you can see that all of the partition queries are done. Let's go back to Power BI. You can see that the refresh here is completed. Now if we go to the settings of the dataset, we can see under the refresh history that the refresh took about 2 minutes. And if we go back to the report, now we can see that the report has loaded 65 million rows worth of trip data. So now we have all of the data in Power BI. Now let's go back to the data set and issue a second refresh. This is the refresh that's going to only load the data for the last 7 days. And let's go to Synapse Studio and take a look at the queries coming. This time you can see that the refresh went fairly quickly, and you can tell by the timestamps here that from 4:07 we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of these queries. If you click on each one of them, you're going to see that they correspond to 1 day. So this time we only processed 70 megabytes worth of data instead of several hundred megabytes worth of data that we had with the original refresh. Now in Power BI service, if we go to the same data set and look at the settings under refresh history, we will see that the second refresh took about 30 some seconds compared to 12 minutes for a full refresh. And this is the beauty of setting up incremental refresh. Not only you reduce the amount of data that you're processing on Azure Synapse Analytics side, hence reducing your overall cost, but also on the Power BI side, you are creating a much faster data set refresh.
In your demo, we saw that the data in the lake was partitioned by year, month, and day. We learned how to set up incremental refresh to make sure that partition pruning is happening. But what if we set up our partitions just on the year? Is it possible that we can set up an incremental refresh, but also still get the benefits of partition pruning on the Synapse side?
Yes, it is possible. Even though the out-of-the-box feature for incremental refresh from Power BI Desktop requires you to have a column that has the data type of date time, if you have another column such as a date ID, or in our case, the pickup year that is of the data type of numeric, you can still do a little bit of work in Power Query to set up incremental refresh by creating a function that returns the year value and wrapping the range end and range start in that function. Let me show you a quick example. Here I have defined a function that takes an input of date time and returns the year value for it. Once I have this function, then I can use the advanced editor and wrap the values of range start and range end in this function. Now that's all I need to do from here. And once I publish this to the Power BI service is going to control the range start and range end as usual and use the year value function to extract the year from them. Now let me show you what the queries look like from Synapse Studio. Here's one of the queries, and as you can see, it is using the pickup year in the where clause and passing in the respective year values.
Well, that wraps up our video for today. Thanks, Shabnam, for joining us and telling us about incremental refreshes in Power BI with Azure Synapse. Tell us in the comments, do you enjoy an incremental refresh? I would love to hear about it. Again, my name is Ryan Magitimer. You can find me on Twitter. You can also find Synapse on Twitter, Azure_Synapse. And more importantly, if you like Twitter, if you like social media, LinkedIn, whatever other social medias people use today, I've got just the program for you, the Azure Synapse Influencers program. It's very exciting. All the cool kids are doing it. You get prizes, there's giveaways, private events. I'm sure there's more stuff. There's titles, yes, very importantly, there's titles. Challenger, Contender, there's a third one. At any rate, those are all moments away when you click the link in the description for this video to sign up. It's very easy, couple of questions, click, 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 and you're there. Like, comment, subscribe. Thanks. Thanks for watching. We'll catch you on the next one.